Hey there, before we begin, do like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this video. And let me know, where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? I'm curious, because time has such a strange way of weaving itself into our stories, doesn't it? Tonight, I'll be guiding you into the world of shadows, whispers, and candlelight. A story that lingers between history and dream. A story that asks what it truly felt like to be a Victorian brothel worker, not in the scandalous exaggerations of gossip, but in the quiet breaths between footsteps in the creak of a stair, in the hush of silk against skin. Take a moment to breathe deeply, to let your body soften. Close your eyes if you wish. Feel the weight of the day melting away. You are safe here, wrapped in sound, in stillness. Our story today begins in London, in a time when the air was thick with soot from factories, and fog drifted low along cobblestones, curling around gas lamps like living ghosts. It is the late 1800s. Imagine narrow streets glistening after a rainfall, the glow of lamps flickering faintly in the mist. Carriages rumble in the distance, their wheels splashing through puddles. A faint scent of coal smoke clings to every breath. And within this atmosphere of industry and shadow, there are houses grand on the outside, but secretive within. Houses where velvet curtains are always drawn, where candles burn long after midnight, and where the sound of hushed laughter and faint music leaks through the cracks of wooden shutters. This is where our tale unfolds, inside one such house. To the passerby, it is just another building, its brick worn, its steps uneven. But to those who know, to those who dare knock on its heavy wooden door, it is something else entirely. A place where reputations are left at the threshold, where power and desire meet, where lives are spent in trade for coins that glitter in the dim light. Inside, the air is warm and heavy with perfume. Oil lamps burn low, their glow casting shadows across wallpaper patterned with fading roses. The floor creaks softly under boots and heels. The furniture is rich but tired velvet cushions with threads fraying, gilded mirrors with cracks spidering across their glass. It is a place that holds beauty and decay in the same breath, just like the lives of those who dwell within it. And here, among these rooms of candlelight and whisper, she lives. Our narrator, our lens, though she will not give her name. Names are fragile, you see. They can be broken, stolen, twisted. In her world, names are locked away like secrets in drawers. But her story is real. She was not born here. None of them were. She remembers the countryside fields stretching beneath wide skies, the smell of hay, the cool breeze that carried birdsong. But those memories are faint now, blurred by years of smoke and city noise. Hunger brought her to London, as it did so many others. Hunger for food, for survival, for something more than what the village could offer. The first time she stepped into the brothel, she noticed the warmth, not just of fire in the grate, but of the eyes that watched her, appraising, measuring, deciding. The madam greeted her with a smile that never reached her eyes. A smile like porcelain smooth, perfect, cold. There were rules, spoken and unspoken. How to smile, how to pour wine, how to laugh just enough to draw men closer, but not enough to betray mockery. It was a theater, and every girl was both actress and stagehand. She learned quickly. She had to. The work was not only what most imagined. Yes, there were men, and there were rooms upstairs where shadows fell heavy and curtains muffled sound. But there was more. There were long evenings of waiting, sitting in parlors with aching backs, pretending to listen to conversations about politics or horse races. There was music, played on cracked pianos, voices singing softly in corners to keep the air from turning too tense. There were arguments, too drunken ones, sharp ones, the kind that left bruises not only on skin, but on spirits. Yet in the quiet moments, when candles burned low and the city outside seemed hushed, she would sit by the window. She would draw back the curtain just an inch, enough to see the world beyond. A lamplighter extinguishing flames one by one, a stray cat darting across the alley, a milkman beginning his route before dawn. Those glimpses reminded her she was still alive, still part of a world that turned with or without her. There were friendships, too. The other girls each carrying her own story, her own reason for being here. Some laughed too loud, hiding fear behind bravado. Others spoke little, their eyes carrying secrets heavier than words. Together they shared stolen bites of bread, whispered dreams in the dark, held one another when tears could no longer be hidden. They were bound not just by work, but by survival. And always, always, there was suspicion. For the brothel was not only a place of desire, but of danger. Police raids, men who paid with counterfeit coins, whispers of diseases no doctor could cure. Every night carried risk, wrapped in perfume and candlelight. She learned to read people quickly. The way a man's hand twitched when he lied, the way his eyes flickered when he carried anger beneath his smile. Those lessons kept her safe, or safer than most. Tonight, in this moment of story, you are invited to walk those halls with her, to hear the muffled piano, to feel the worn velvet beneath your fingertips, to smell the faint smoke of candles that are nearly burned to their wick. You are asked not to judge, but to listen, to drift with her voice, as soft and steady as the rain against the glass. And as you listen, let yourself drift too, not to sleep just yet, but to a liminal place between waking and dream, where imagination paints every detail sharper than reality. Because in this house, in this time, every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat matters. Our story has just begun. The night deepens as the house grows quieter. The music has faded, the laughter has softened into murmurs, and yet the work never truly ends. Behind closed doors, footsteps creak faintly overhead. A whisper here, a sigh there, the rustle of skirts and boots as stories unfold in private. And down in the parlor, she sits with her thoughts, hands folded in her lap, the flicker of the candle casting a halo of light upon her weary face. The parlor smells of wax and perfume. She gazes at the mirror on the wall opposite her, its frame gilded though chipped, and wonders at the reflection staring back. Is it truly her? Or only the mask she has learned to wear? The painted smile, the soft eyes that promise warmth, even when her own heart beats cold with exhaustion. She leans closer to the mirror, brushing a curl of hair from her cheek, and whispers silently to herself, as though to keep the truth alive, you are still here. Outside, the city does not sleep. Even at this hour, horses clatter across cobblestones, drunken shouts echo in alleys, and the smell of smoke and roasting chestnuts drifts faintly through the cracks of the windows. The world keeps spinning, uncaring, while within these walls, time feels suspended, stretched thin like a candle burning too long. She recalls her first client, the nervousness that filled her chest, the way her hands trembled as she poured wine into a glass. He was kind enough, gentle even, but the weight of expectation pressed down on her so heavily she felt she might shatter. Later, when the door closed behind him, she sat on the edge of her bed and cried, softly, silently, into her pillow, careful not to let the others hear. They would not mock her, no. They would understand, but she wished to keep that fragile moment of grief her own. In the weeks that followed, she hardened. Not cruelly, not bitterly, but out of necessity. The trick, she learned, was to balance. To give enough of herself that the men felt wanted, but never so much that she lost herself completely. To wear charm like a cloak, slipping it on and off with practiced ease. And slowly, she found she could do it, that she could smile and laugh and play her part without breaking. Yet she never stopped watching the faces of men who returned again and again, some lonely, some arrogant, some broken in ways they would never admit. And she realized that they, too, wore masks. In their laughter, in their boasting, In the coins they pressed into her palm, there was often a hollowness. Perhaps that was why they came. Perhaps that was why they needed this place as much as she did, though for reasons they might never understand. The madam of the house, stern and sharp, walked with the elegance of someone who had lived too many lives. Her voice could command silence in a room with a single word. To the clients, she was gracious, witty, even charming. But to the girls, she was iron. Rules were absolute. Defiance was not tolerated. And yet, beneath her coldness, there was something else. A knowledge, perhaps, that this was the only way to keep the house running. The only way to protect the fragile balance between survival and ruin. Still, danger always lingered. There were nights when the knock at the door was too loud, too sudden, and fear rippled through the house. Police raids were not uncommon. When that happened, the girls were told to scatter, to hide, to vanish like shadows into the cracks of the building. Sometimes bribes were paid, sometimes threats exchanged, sometimes tears shed. And in the aftermath, when the house settled again, there would always be a silence that lingered longer than comfort allowed. Yet despite the fear, there was laughter. Real laughter, sometimes. In stolen moments between work, when the girls gathered in the kitchen late at night, sharing scraps of bread and cups of watered wine. They told stories, exaggerated tales of clients, mimicked voices, laughed until their sides ached. For a brief while, the weight lifted, and they were simply women together, clinging to joy in a world that offered so little of it. She remembers one girl in particular, Eliza. Bright-eyed, quick-witted, with a laugh like bells. Eliza had been there longer than most, and though life had not spared her, she carried herself with a confidence that drew people in. To the others, she was both sister and protector. When tempers flared, she soothed. When tears fell, she comforted. And when silence became too heavy, she found ways to break it with humor. To this day, our narrator remembers the warmth of Eliza's presence, a reminder that not all was shadow, that even in the darkest corners, light could still be found. And yet, she also remembers the night Eliza did not return. A man too rough, too careless, too cruel. The details were whispered, never spoken aloud, but the absence was deafening. A chair empty at the kitchen table, a laugh missing from the air. They carried on, as they always did, because there was no choice. But in the quiet moments, the grief lingered, a wound that never fully healed. Our narrator often wonders how history will remember them, if it remembers them at all. The books and stories of the Victorian era speak of factories, of great inventions, of wars and empires. But what of the women in these houses? What of the lives lived in whispers and shadows, in laughter and tears, in survival and strength? Will anyone care to tell their stories, to honor their resilience? Or will they remain ghosts, fading into the cracks of time? As the candle burns lower, she stretches her hand to the flame, feeling its warmth without letting it burn her skin. A fragile balance, much like her life. Always close to the edge, but never fully consumed. She exhales softly, letting her breath mingle with the flicker of the flame, and whispers again, as though reminding herself once more, "You are still here." And so the night continues, each moment drawn out like threads of silk, weaving a tapestry of shadows, laughter, danger, and endurance. A tapestry she never chose to weave, yet one she has come to know as her own. Dawn comes slowly to London. The first light does not pierce the fog, but glimmers faintly through it, turning the air a pale gray. The city begins to stir, milk carts rattling, the calls of street vendors, the distant whistle of a factory bell. Within the brothel, however, time feels different. Curtains remain drawn, lamps still glow faintly, and the women sleep at odd hours, their bodies accustomed to nights stretched long. Our narrator awakens in her small room at the back of the house. The walls are papered with roses that have long since faded, curling at the edges, their beauty worn away by years of smoke and candle soot. Her bed creaks when she shifts, the thin mattress pressing against wooden slats beneath. She pulls the blanket closer, savoring the last moments of warmth before the day must begin again. She listens. That is how she always begins her mornings or afternoons, depending on when she wakes. She listens to the house, the shuffle of feet in the hallway, the low murmur of voices, the clang of pots in the kitchen. Each sound tells her something. Who has risen, who still sleeps, who is in good humor, who is not. It is a survival skill, as important as any, to read the tone of the house before stepping into it. Eventually, she rises. Her dress from the night before hangs draped across a chair, its fabric wrinkled, faintly perfumed with smoke and cologne. She smooths it with her hands, then pours water from a pitcher into the basin on the small table. The water is cold, racing against her skin as she splashes her face, washing away the last fragments of sleep. She studies her reflection in the small mirror above the basin. Her eyes are tired, yes, but alive. And that is enough. The kitchen is where they gather in daylight. A cramped room with low ceilings, always smelling of bread, tea, and smoke from the iron stove. Here the masks can slip, just a little. The girls sit with their hair loose, their faces bare of powder and paint, their laughter softer but more genuine. They share cups of weak tea, slices of bread, the occasional boiled egg if fortune allows. Conversation drifts between gossip, small complaints, and the occasional moment of confession. It is in these moments she feels closest to them, her sisters in survival. Each girl so different in origin, some from farms, some from factories, some from families too poor or too cruel to keep them. Yet all paths have led here, to this narrow kitchen, where their voices blend together like threads in a single cloth. The madam rarely joins them here. Her meals are taken separately, her presence always apart, but she is never far. Even when she is not seen, her influence lingers, her rules shaping every breath the girls take. There are those who resent her, who curse her name in whispers. Yet there are also those who acknowledge, quietly, that without her, they would have nothing at all. Survival often demands contradiction. After the meal, the house must be prepared again. Rooms cleaned, sheets changed, candles trimmed, carpets brushed. It is work that falls to the girls as much as the hired maids. The brothel may glitter at night, but by morning it is weary, worn down by the demands of the hours before. And so, with aching hands and tired backs, they restore it, piece by piece, preparing for the cycle to begin anew. Our narrator often wonders, in these hours of labor, whether the men who come at night ever imagine this side of the house. Do they know that the velvet cushions must be beaten free of dust? That the gowns must be mended with needle and thread, patched carefully so the tears do not show? That laughter at night is earned by sweat in the day? Somehow she doubts it. To most of them, the house exists only in the glow of candlelight, polished and painted, untouched by the reality of toil. When her chores are done, she allows herself a walk. Not far, never far, for the madam is strict about the boundaries they must keep. But sometimes she slips out into the narrow streets nearby, her shawl wrapped tightly about her shoulders, her head lowered to avoid notice. She breathes in the air of the city coal smoke, horse dung, baking bread, the mingled sense of life packed too closely together. The streets are crowded, noisy, alive with vendors shouting, children darting between wheels, women carrying baskets of laundry or food. It is chaotic, but in its chaos, it feels real, more real than the illusions of the brothel. Once, she passed a bookshop. Its windows were dusty, its shelves lined with volumes she could never afford. Yet she paused, drawn to the sight of words bound and waiting. She has always loved stories, though her own education was cut short by necessity. Sometimes she dreams of returning there, of saving enough coins to buy a single book. something to read by candlelight when the nights grow too heavy. A dream, perhaps foolish, but still hers. And so the days pass into nights, nights into days, the rhythm of her life steady and unrelenting. Yet within it, she finds small fragments of beauty. The warmth of a fire on a cold evening. The laughter of another girl that bubbles up unexpectedly. The rare kindness of a man who treats her not as an object, but as a person. These are the moments she holds on to, like pearls strung on a thread, fragile but luminous. Still, the dangers never fade. Whispers of disease spread like shadows in the corners. A cough here, a fever there, and fear ripples quietly through the house. The madam insists on caution, on hygiene, on rules that must be followed strictly. But fear cannot always be kept at bay. Each girl knows the risks, though they speak of them rarely, as if silence itself could hold the sickness at a distance. And in the silence of night, when she lies awake in her narrow bed, she sometimes hears the city itself breathing, the faint hum of carriages, the distant shouts of night watchmen, the rustle of rats in the walls. It is a reminder that beyond these rooms, life continues, indifferent to her struggles. Yet she also feels, strangely, a sense of belonging to this world. A small thread in the vast fabric of the city, unseen but present, forgotten by history perhaps, but real in this moment, in this story. And so she whispers again, to herself, to the dark, to the silence. You are still here. Evening comes more swiftly than she expects, as it always does. The sky, once gray with fog, darkens into a deep indigo, the gas lamps outside flickering back to life one by one. The house begins its transformation again, shifting from the quiet rhythms of day to the elaborate theater of night. Candles are lit, curtains drawn tighter, and the air grows heavy once more with the scent of perfume and wine. Dresses are chosen with care silks and satins that shimmer even in low light, chosen not for comfort, but for allure. Our narrator smooths her down, adjusting the bodice, pinning her hair until it gleams under the glow of the lamps. Her face, painted carefully in the small mirror, becomes a mask of warmth and invitation. The mask she has worn so often, it feels at times as though it might replace her true self altogether. In the parlor, the piano begins its song. A tune not quite in tune, but sweet enough to fill the room with atmosphere. Laughter follows soon after, as men arrive in twos and threes, their boots clattering on the stairs, their voices loud, their pockets heavy with coins. The girls spread out across the room, like pieces in a grand game, each step deliberate, each glance calculated, each smile carrying meaning. She watches them, as always, while playing her own part. The girl with a lilting laugh draws a wealthy man toward her corner. Another, quieter but no less skilled, whispers something that makes her companion lean closer, entranced. It is an art, this dance of attention and desire, and she has learned its steps well. Yet behind every gesture lies exhaustion. Behind every smile, a weariness that only the girls can see in one another. A man approaches her tonight, tall, with a mustache neatly trimmed, his coat finely tailored, his boots polished. He smells faintly of tobacco and brandy. He greets her with a practiced charm, bowing low, his words smooth as silk. She responds in kind, her voice soft, her laughter measured. They speak of little things at first, the weather, the theater, the latest news from the Queen's court. She listens, nods, asks questions at the right moments. She has mastered the art of appearing fascinated. But behind his words, she senses something else. A sharpness in his eyes, a tension in the way he grips his glass. She has seen it before, and she knows to tread carefully. The night could end in laughter or in bruises, and the balance between the two is as fragile as the flame of the candle between them. Still, she carries on. It is what she must do. She leads him with grace, guiding him through the house, through the rituals of the night. When the door closes behind them, The mask becomes heavier, the silence thicker. And yet, she endures, as she always does. Later, when the door opens again and he departs, leaving behind coins that glimmer on the table, she exhales deeply, her body heavy with weariness. She collects the coins, slipping them into the box the madam keeps, taking her share as allowed. The rest goes to the house, as always. The cycle is unbroken. Back in the parlor, the air is thick with laughter and smoke. The piano plays louder now, the voices rising, the night carrying on as though nothing has changed. She takes a seat, pours herself a small glass of watered wine, and allows her shoulders to rest. The room is loud, but within her, a quiet hum persists. She remembers Eliza in moments like this. Eliza's laughter, her presence, the way she could lighten the room, even after the heaviest of nights. The memory aches, but it also warms. She clings to it, a reminder that even here, joy had once existed, and perhaps still could. The hours stretch on. Men come and go. Laughter ebbs and flows. The piano falters and resumes. The night is both endless and fleeting, a blur of faces and voices and fleeting connections. And through it all, she endures, her mask firmly in place, her heart steady in its rhythm. At last, the crowd begins to thin. The men depart, stumbling into the foggy streets, their boots echoing against cobblestones. The house grows quieter, the air heavy with the remnants of smoke and perfume. Candles burn low, their wax dripping into small pools on the tables. She retreats to her room, her body aching, her mind buzzing faintly with the echo of voices. She removes her gown carefully, folding it across the chair, then loosens the pins in her hair, letting it fall loose across her shoulders. The mirror reflects a tired face, pale in the candlelight, the paint smudged, the eyes shadowed. And yet, within them, a spark remains. A quiet defiance, a whisper that insists, "You are still here." Lying in her narrow bed, she listens once more to the sounds of the house. The creak of floorboards as another girl moves about, the faint cough of someone down the hall, the whisper of wind against the shutters. She lets the sounds wash over her, familiar and steady, until her body relaxes, until her breath grows slow. And as she drifts towards sleep, her thoughts wander. To the countryside she left behind, to fields of grass and skies unclouded by smoke, to the sound of birdsong, the scent of hay, the warmth of sun on her skin. Dreams and memories blur together, forming a softer world, one untouched by the shadows of her present. For in dreams, she can be anything. In dreams, she is not a girl in a brothel, not a mask behind painted lips, not a body traded for coins. In dreams, she is free. And so the night ends, as it always does, in silence, in shadows, in the fragile embrace of sleep. Our story drifts onward, like a lantern carried gently through mist, and the footsteps of our Victorian tale sound faintly on cobblestones slick with midnight rain. Inside the narrow, lamplit alleys, the scent of coal smoke curls against damp walls, while distant carriage wheels rumble, as if the city itself exhales a tired breath. Imagine for just a moment the glow of gaslight flickering across brickwork, soft golden halos stretching outward into darkness, guiding you toward a doorway most people would pass by without a second glance. That doorway hides secrets, and tonight we begin to uncover them. Within the brothel, rooms are draped in faded velvet curtains and worn lace, colored by candlelight that dances restlessly against cracked mirrors. There is laughter here, though muffled and tired, laughter that carries the weight of survival. Women in silk dresses, some bright, some patched, move with rehearsed elegance, offering charms that hide exhaustion. The air is thick with perfume, cheap gin, and a bittersweet sense of longing. Yet behind every smile is a story, a life lived in quiet tension, bound to the rhythm of London's ever-hungry streets. Tonight, You step into that rhythm with soft imagination, letting it soothe you even as it intrigues. Picture yourself seated near the hearth in the main room, where the crackling of firewood softens the chill of damp weather outside. The flickering flames create a cocoon, a shelter from the cruel winds beyond the door. Around you, whispers drift like ribbons, voices telling tales not meant for judgment, but for the simple exchange of coin and comfort. Some men laugh too loudly, others whisper too much, and in between, the women learn to adapt, reading faces like maps, finding safety in knowing who might be kind and who might be cruel. This hidden knowledge is their shield, their craft as delicate as embroidery, and just as meticulous. Our story tonight will follow one such woman, her name embroidered in whispers, as if it were a secret prayer, Eliza. She is neither the youngest nor the oldest here, not the most adorned nor the most plain. Yet she carries an energy, a gravity, that draws eyes toward her when she passes. Her dress, though threadbare in places, seems to shine with her movement. Her laughter, though practiced, holds a softness that feels real enough to comfort. And though men may come and go, though nights may blur into one another, Eliza endures, carving moments of dignity within walls that rarely allow it. It is through her that we shall walk these velvet halls, through her that we will glimpse what it meant to survive, and perhaps to dream. Imagine, as the hours unfold, Eliza stepping out into the damp night after the brothel's doors finally close. The streets are empty save for stray cats winding between shadows. She breathes deeply, inhaling the faint tang of river mist carried by the Thames. For a brief moment, away from prying eyes and the demands of others, she belongs only to herself. She tilts her head back, watching the faint stars flicker through a veil of soot and smoke. The night air is cold, but in it there is honesty, a relief from the endless performance inside. This balance between the false and the true, between survival and self, is the heartbeat of her life. As you let this image settle, notice how your own body softens. Each detail of Eliza's world carries you deeper, not into heaviness, but into gentle rhythm, like the sway of a ship anchored in quiet waters. The more you imagine, the calmer you feel. The sound of carriage wheels fades, the glow of gaslight dims, and all that remains is the slow, steady breath of the city at night. Our story is only beginning, a tapestry unwinding thread by thread, and soon we will follow Eliza further into her journey, into the unseen corners of Victorian life, where secrets and survival intertwine like shadows in candlelight. Our story resumes with a last breath of candlelight flickered against Eliza's thoughtful face, the gaslit streets stretching like quiet veins of the city around her. The distant bells of St. Paul's toll softly through the fog, the sound muffled yet resonant, as if the entire city is slowly exhaling into the night. Eliza draws her shawl closer around her shoulders, feeling both exposed and invisible at once, her footsteps tapping softly against the slick cobblestones. She knows the way back to her modest rented room, yet she lingers, savoring the solitude, for it is the only time of day when she belongs to herself entirely. And as you breathe with her, slowly and evenly, you too feel that weight lifting, that sense of release when the world grows quiet and the eyes of others no longer press upon you. She pauses by the riverfront, where the Thames flows like a black ribbon under the shivering moonlight. The water carries secrets, whispers of merchant ships, of lovers' trysts, of crimes hidden beneath its shifting currents. Eliza leans against the railing, the cold iron grounding her, and imagines what it might be like to escape, to drift away on one of those distant vessels, to start anew in some far-off place where her name is unknown. Yet the thought drifts as quickly as it comes replaced by the practical weight of coins hidden in the hem of her dress, her nightly earnings meager, but essential every penny already destined for rent bread or the landlady's insistent demands. Still, here in the soft rhythm of flowing water, she allows herself to dream, if only for the length of a sigh. Inside the brothel, her nights are filled with roles and masks, but outside, she allows memory to bloom. She recalls the quiet village she once called home, fields that stretched green and wide, skies untainted by the black smoke of chimneys. She remembers laughter that was not performed, warmth that was not bought. Yet, like so many women of her time, circumstance drew her to London's crowded heart, a place where survival left little room for innocence. She thinks of the choices, or rather, the lack of choices that guided her here. These thoughts do not bring sorrow tonight. Instead, they wash over her with a kind of tenderness, as though remembering who she once was is itself an act of resistance against the world that tries to define her. The night air cools her cheeks as she continues on, weaving through narrow streets, lit only by weak lamps and the glow of distant taverns. A stray dog trots beside her for a moment, its fur patchy, its eyes weary yet kind. She bends down, offering a scrap of bread she saved from supper, and for a brief instant, she feels connected to another soul that expects nothing but kindness. The dog wags its tail and disappears into the shadows, leaving Eliza with a faint trace of warmth that simple gestures often bring. In your imagination, let that warmth ripple outward small, gentle, steady, until it calms you too, reminding you that comfort can exist even in the unlikeliest corners. At last, she reaches her lodging, a narrow room above a baker's shop, where the scent of stale bread clings to the stairwell. She unlocks the door and steps inside, greeted by silence and the faint creak of old wood beneath her feet. The room is bare, a narrow bed, a chipped basin, a cracked window with curtains she stitched herself. Yet here, unlike the brothel, every object belongs to her, no matter how modest. She lights a candle, the flame flickering warmly, and removes her shawl, her dress, her shoes, setting them neatly aside as though each item has earned its rest. The ritual of undressing, of folding, of tidying, is her way of reclaiming order in a world that often feels chaotic. In these simple motions, there is peace. She sits on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. Each tug through the strands is both soothing and grounding, a reminder of her own presence, her own body, her own rhythm. Outside, the city hums faintly distant laughter from a tavern, the rattle of a carriage wheel, the call of a drunkard in the night. But here, the sounds are softened, muffled, almost like a lullaby. She breathes deeply, inhaling the faint scent of candle wax and wood. As your mind lingers on her quiet ritual, allow yourself to mirror it. Imagine brushing away the day, each stroke unraveling tension, each breath smoothing out the rough edges of thought. The rhythm is slow, gentle, hypnotic. Your body grows heavier, your breathing steadier, just as Eliza's does when at last she lies down, pulling the thin quilt over herself. The candle flickers one final time before she pinches it out, leaving only the tender glow of moonlight spilling across her floorboards. The city continues to breathe outside, but here, in her room, the night is hers alone. And as she closes her eyes, she drifts not only into sleep, but into story, weaving dreams from threads of longing, resilience, and fleeting glimpses of freedom. Our tale will follow her further, through the days and nights of Victorian London, through hidden struggles and fragile hopes, as we gently wander deeper into her world. For now, simply rest beside her in imagination, soothed by the stillness, lulled by the rhythm of her quiet strength. The story stirs again, like the faint embers of a fire rekindling at dawn, as Eliza awakens in her narrow bed. The faint light of morning creeps through the cracked curtains, painting pale stripes across her floorboards. Outside, the muffled hum of London begins its daily chorus, the rattle of carts, the cries of street vendors, the clatter of hooves against stone. She blinks against the dim light, stretching slowly, her body stiff from a night of little rest. Yet, despite her weariness, she rises, for the city waits for no one, least of all a woman who must always be a step ahead to endure. As you imagine her morning, feel your own breath lengthen, your chest rising and falling like the tide of her steady determination. She fills her chipped basin with water, carried up from the pump, the liquid shockingly cold against her skin. She splashes it across her face, gasping quietly as it sharpens her senses, brushing away the remnants of dream. The air in her small room is chilly, but she welcomes it. The cold reminds her that she is alive, that each day is another chance, another effort. She dries herself with a worn cloth, then smooths her dress, patching small tears where the seams have begun to fray. Every detail matters, for in her line of work, appearances are both shield and weapon. The illusion of beauty, of charm, must be maintained even when the body underneath aches. By late morning, Eliza makes her way through crowded markets, her shawl pulled tight, blending into the flow of people who rarely glance her way. Stalls overflow with vegetables, bread, fish packed in salt, trinkets from sailors who've just returned. The air is sharp with the scent of coal smoke, mingling with fried eels and damp wool. She buys only what she needs: a loaf of bread, a handful of apples, her coins counted carefully so that none slip away unnecessarily. As she moves, she listens. Snippets of gossip, the latest price of coal, whispers of protests or scandals, they all swirl through the air, each a fragment of the city's endless story. For Eliza, listening is survival. Knowledge can mean safety, can mean one step ahead of danger. On her way back, she passes a group of factory children, their faces smudged with soot, their clothes hanging in tatters. They chase one another despite their weariness, laughter bubbling out into the street. The sound makes her pause, her heart tugging at the echo of something once her childhood unburdened by worry. For a fleeting moment, she smiles, warmed by their innocence. Yet the moment fades quickly, as reality presses again upon her shoulders. She continues walking, the image of the children following her like a shadow, reminding her that the world has never been gentle, especially not to the poor, the abandoned, the forgotten. By the time she reaches the brothel again, the sun has dipped behind smoky rooftops, casting the city into a gray haze. Inside, the air feels heavier than the crisp morning. Candles are already lit, their flames licking shadows into the corners, while the madam oversees preparations with hawk-like precision. Dresses are laid out, powders and paints scattered across tables. The women chatter softly, their voices edged with both camaraderie and tension. Each prepares in her own way, some with laughter, some in silence, some with trembling hands. Eliza sits quietly before a small mirror, dabbing powder across her cheeks, painting her lips with a practiced steadiness. She knows her role, her mask, and she slips into it with the same ease as one pulls on a glove. As the evening unfolds, clients begin to arrive. The sound of boots against floorboards echoes down the hall, mingled with the clink of coins and forced laughter. The brothel becomes a theater, each woman an actress, each man an audience both eager and unkind. Eliza moves among them with grace, her laughter timed, her glances measured. Some men are gentle, their loneliness palpable, seeking not lust but comfort. Eliza navigates each encounter like a dancer moving between blades, her survival balanced on instinct and intuition. And though exhaustion gnaws at her, she endures, because endurance is her only choice. Later, when the crowd has thinned and the house begins to quiet, Eliza steps outside once more into the night. The cool air greets her like an old friend, washing away the suffocating perfume of candle smoke and sweat. She leans against the brick wall, her body weary, yet her spirit unbroken. Above her, the stars struggle to pierce the London haze, faint but persistent. She allows herself a deep breath, a moment of stillness. In that breath lies a fragment of freedom, however fleeting. She treasures it, for these moments are hers alone, and they give her the strength to return again tomorrow. As you imagine her standing there beneath the pale stars, let yourself feel that same sense of release. The day is behind you now, its weight loosening. Your breathing deepens, your body softens, and in your mind's eye, you stand beside Eliza in the quiet, listening to the hum of the city fade into the distance. Each sound grows softer, each thought quieter, until all that remains is the rhythm of your breath and the gentle strength of a woman who continues, despite all, to endure. The story flows onward, like a lantern drifting down the Thames, casting pale ripples across the dark water of memory. Eliza's night has ended, but the city around her never truly sleeps. As she steps back into her narrow room above the baker's shop, the air is cool and tinged with flour, a faint comfort that softens the edges of her fatigue. She closes the door, leaning her forehead against the wood for a moment, feeling the grain press into her skin. It is in these fragile pauses, when no one watches, that she is most herself, no longer the mask, no longer the painted smile, but simply Eliza. You, too, can allow yourself to soften here, imagining the door closing on your own worries, the weight slipping quietly away as night deepens. She lights her small candle, its flame flickering gently, and sets her coins carefully on the table. Each clink of metal is deliberate, each coin counted twice. Money is not simply currency for her, it is survival, rent, bread, perhaps someday even escape. She places the small stack into a tin box she hides beneath a loose floorboard, the ritual both protective and hopeful. As she does so, her mind wanders. She wonders how long she will endure this life, how many nights blend into the next, how many faces she must pretend to adore. And yet, even as weariness creeps into her bones, she does not let despair settle. She reminds herself that life, like the tide, is always shifting. Perhaps tomorrow will bring something unexpected. Perhaps tomorrow will be different. She sits at the edge of her bed, hair tumbling over her shoulders, and takes out a small book hidden beneath her pillow. It is not much a worn collection of poems, gifted by a man long gone, a man who once promised more than he could ever deliver. Still, the book is hers, and within its faded pages she finds solace. She traces the words with her finger, whispering them softly, as though reciting a prayer. Poetry carries her away, beyond the brothel, beyond the gray city, into meadows and skies she has not seen in years. In the stillness, her breath slows, her shoulders ease. Words have a magic that no coin can purchase, and tonight they lull her toward a peace she rarely feels. The hours slip by, and at last Eliza lies down beneath her quilt, the candle extinguished, the moonlight washing her room in silver shadows. Her thoughts drift between memory and dream, until sleep finally claims her. And in that sleep, her mind wanders to gentler places. She dreams of fields stretching green and endless, of rivers running clear, of laughter not bound by transaction. She dreams of a version of herself unburdened, free. The dreams are bittersweet, for she knows they are fragile, yet she clings to them all the same. They are her refuge, her secret rebellion against a world that often denies her softness. Morning comes again, gray and damp, the city shaking itself awake. Eliza stirs, rubbing her eyes, pulling herself from dream back into duty. The cycle begins anew. She dresses, mends the small tear in her shawl, and prepares for another day. Yet there is a subtle strength in her repetition, a resilience carved from hardship. As she walks the streets once more, weaving through vendors and beggars and gentlemen alike, she notices everything. The way the baker's boy hides a smile as he slips an extra roll into her paper bag. The way a woman hums to her infant, despite her exhaustion. The way the fog curls around chimney tops, softening even the harshest edges of the city. She collects these details like treasures, carrying them close to her heart, each a reminder that even in struggle, beauty flickers. That evening, as she returns to the brothel, she notices something new. A stranger stands near the door, a man unfamiliar, his coat fine, his hat pressed low. He lingers with hesitation, unlike the others who enter boldly, unashamed. His gaze catches hers briefly, and in that fleeting glance, there is no hunger, no arrogance, only curiosity. Eliza's chest tightens, though she quickly looks away. She cannot afford to wonder too much, cannot risk the distraction of hope. And yet, the image of his eyes lingers in her mind, quiet as the flame of a candle, yet impossible to ignore. Perhaps he will fade from her memory by tomorrow. Perhaps not. Either way, tonight, he has unsettled the rhythm of her thoughts. Inside, the madam calls, and Eliza resumes her role, painting her smile, softening her voice. But beneath the mask, her mind is alive with new possibilities, however faint. Change in her world rarely announces itself with fanfare. It comes quietly, hidden in fleeting moments, in chance encounters, in glances exchanged in the shadow of gaslight. As she steps into the night's performance once more, she carries the secret thought that maybe, just maybe, her story will shift in ways she cannot yet foresee. And as you rest here beside her story, let yourself feel the rhythm too. Life's hardships are softened in imagination, its moments stretched like warm fabric, wrapping you gently. Your breath grows steady, your thoughts slower, your body heavier. You drift, as Eliza drifts, through shadows and candlelight, through dreams and possibilities, until all that remains is calm and the quiet hum of resilience. The story picks up once more, like a thread tugged gently through fabric, weaving deeper into the quiet rhythm of Eliza's days and nights. The stranger's glance lingers in her mind as the hours stretch forward, a small ripple disturbing the calm surface of her practiced existence. In the brothel, she plays her part as she always has, smiling at jokes that sting, softening her voice for men whose hands are rough, laughing with women whose own laughter hides exhaustion. Yet beneath it all, a new awareness hums faintly, as if the city itself has shifted, whispering that change may be nearer than she dares to believe. As you imagine her moving through the candlelit room, let yourself breathe evenly, each inhale and exhale carrying you deeper into this unfolding tale. The madam watches everything with sharp eyes, her presence a constant weight in the house. She notices Eliza's calm kosher, her ability to soothe even the most restless of men, and praises her quietly when no one else is listening. Praise is rare, almost unheard of, and though Eliza accepts it with a simple nod, inside she feels a small spark of pride. It is not joy exactly, but it is something, a reminder that she is more than invisible, that even in this life of endless masks, she can command a certain quiet strength. That spark becomes her anchor through the long night, carrying her until the last guest departs and silence settles once again over the brothel's halls. When at last she steps outside into the fog-draped street, she notices him again. The stranger is still there, lingering by the lamp-post, as though uncertain whether to approach. He is not dressed like the usual patrons, his coat finely tailored, his hat trimmed neatly, his boots polished clean despite the mud of the streets. Their eyes meet once more, and though no words pass between them, a silence is charged, filled with unspoken questions. Eliza feels the weight of it in her chest, though she forces herself to turn away, walking briskly toward her lodgings. The city swallows her quickly, the sound of her footsteps merging with the steady rhythm of hooves and wheels. Yet behind her eyelids, even as she lies down later that night, the stranger's image remains. Morning arrives gray and damp again, the familiar veil of London fog settling low over the streets. Eliza moves through her routine as always, fetching water, mending her dress, eating her bread in silence. Yet she feels a subtle shift within herself. The air seems charged, her senses keener, her thoughts wandering more often toward possibilities she once dismissed as foolish. She carries herself differently through the market, noticing the way vendors nod politely, the way passers-by glance without lingering. Even the children in the street seem to laugh more brightly, their voices rising like bells through the morning haze. The city feels alive in a way she has not felt it before, and she wonders if the change lies not in the streets, but in her own heart. Later that evening, as she returns to the brothel, she braces herself for another long night, another endless performance. Yet when she steps inside, she finds the stranger already there, speaking quietly with the madam. His posture is poised, his tone measured, but his gaze flickers toward Eliza as though pulled by invisible thread. The madam's expression shifts between curiosity and calculation, for she has seen many men before, but rarely one who lingers with such hesitation, such quiet intensity. Eliza feels the weight of their conversation, even without hearing the words. A sense that something within her carefully ordered world is about to tilt, to bend, perhaps even to break. The hours that follow blur together, filled with laughter that feels thinner than usual, with eyes that drift again and again toward the door where the stranger once stood. Eliza's thoughts wander, her rhythm faltering ever so slightly, though she hides it well. She wonders who he is, why he lingers, what draws him here. Curiosity blooms in her chest, fragile and dangerous. For curiosity in her world can be both gift and curse. Yet it cannot be silenced. It hums within her like a lullaby, steady and insistent, guiding her deeper into the possibilities she has long avoided. That night, when she returns once more to her narrow room, she does not reach for her book of poems, nor does she collapse immediately into sleep. Instead, she sits by the window, staring out into the fog, her hands folded in her lap. The city stretches before her, its gaslights glowing faintly like scattered stars, its sound softened by distance. She imagines what it might be like to step beyond her role, beyond the walls of the brothel, beyond the endless cycle of survival. She imagines speaking to him, learning his story, allowing herself for once to hope. The thought frightens her, for hope is dangerous when life demands endurance. Yet she cannot let it go, not tonight. The possibility lingers, like the faint glow of moonlight through her window, delicate but undeniable. And as you picture her sitting there in the silence, you, too, can feel the hum of curiosity settle gently over you. It is not restless but soothing, a reminder that even in repetition, newness can emerge, subtle and tender. Your breathing steadies, your body softens, your thoughts slow, each drifting like fog over quiet streets. You rest as Eliza rests on the edge of possibility, not rushing, not forcing, simply allowing the rhythm of the story to carry you deeper into calm. The tale continues like a soft whisper carried along the fog, unfolding with patience, weaving Eliza's life into something delicate and haunting. She sits at her window, her chin resting against the back of her hand, eyes fixed on the blurred outlines of chimneys and rooftops glowing faintly under the pale moon. Sleep does not come quickly tonight. Instead, her mind drifts to the stranger, his hesitation, his gaze, the way his presence seemed unlike the others. She wonders if he sought the brothel for pleasure, for curiosity, or for something entirely different. The thought circles her mind like ripples in water, never loud, never demanding, simply persistent. As you imagine her lingering there, in the glow of candle smoke and moonlight, allow your own thoughts to soften, drifting like fog without need for answers. Days pass, and each one feels both the same and slightly altered, as if the world has shifted just a fraction of an inch. Eliza continues her routine, the market in the morning, coins carefully counted, bread and apples carried home in her shawl. The brothel at night, the endless dance of smiles and sighs, the delicate navigation of tempers and desires. Yet through it all, she listens for a certain step, watches for a familiar silhouette in the doorway. Sometimes he is there, sometimes not, but the possibility of his presence lingers even in his absence. It gives her something she has not felt in years. Anticipation, a spark that flickers like a secret flame in her chest. One evening, when the gaslights burn low and the rain taps gently against the window panes, he does appear again. This time, he does not hesitate at the door. He enters with quiet confidence, though his movements are still restrained, his eyes scanning the room with careful curiosity. The madam greets him warmly, always alert to men who carry wealth in their coats and polish in their boots. Yet when Eliza steps forward, his gaze rests on her with a softness she has rarely seen in the eyes of men here. It is not hunger nor arrogance, but something closer to recognition, as though he sees her as more than the mask she wears. Their interaction is brief, no more than polite words exchanged, but it settles into Eliza like a seed, small and fragile, yet full of possibility. Later, when she retires to her room, she cannot shake the memory of his voice, measured, calm, carrying a weight of thought behind each word. She sits again by her window, listening to the rhythm of rain against the glass, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the sill. She recalls his manner, his hesitation, the way he seemed both out of place and yet deeply present. She wonders if she will see him again, if this fragile thread of connection will unravel or be woven deeper into her story. Her heart beats slowly, steadily, but her mind lingers on questions she dares not answer. In this quiet wondering, she finds herself both restless and soothed, as though even the act of imagining a different life is enough to carry her gently toward rest. The next day dawns gray once more, fog curling thick through the streets, muffling the cries of vendors and the rattle of wheels. Eliza walks with her basket, her shawl pulled tight, her thoughts half in the present and half elsewhere. She notices the way the world continues without pause, the same beggars calling for coin, the same chimney sweeps darting through narrow lanes, the same hawkers shouting the price of oysters and coal. Yet for her, each detail feels sharper, as though she has begun to see the city not as a cage, but as a vast landscape filled with hidden doors. She does not know where those doors lead, or if she will ever step through them, but the thought itself gives her strength. That evening, when she returns to the brothel, she notices how heavy the air feels. The laughter is more strained, the men more boisterous, the women more weary. The madam scolds sharply, her nerves frayed by unpaid debts and rowdy guests. Eliza feels the tension prickling like static in the room, yet she endures with her practiced calm, moving gracefully through each interaction. Beneath the surface, however, her mind drifts once again to the stranger, to the possibility of something gentler, something different. The duality of her existence, the mask and the dream, becomes sharper, yet somehow more bearable. For even if the dream remains out of reach, its presence keeps her spirit from sinking entirely into the dimness of routine. That night, when the last candle is extinguished and the house lies in silence, Eliza allows herself to imagine the stranger not as patron, but as story. Perhaps he is a traveler, passing briefly through London on his way to distant lands. Perhaps he is a scholar, drawn not by desire, but by curiosity about lives hidden from the polished world. Perhaps he is someone who sees her, truly sees her, in a way she has long forgotten was possible. Each possibility is tender, each one shaping itself into a dream that rocks her gently toward sleep. In the softness of these imaginings, she finds a peace deeper than any she has known in months. And as you linger here with her, breathing in rhythm with the quiet night, you too can feel that softness settle over you. The harshness of the world fades, replaced by the hum of candlelight, the patter of rain, the warmth of fragile possibility. Your body sinks heavier into rest. Your thoughts drift slower, like clouds dissolving into mist. Together, you and Eliza linger in the calm of what might be, soothed by the rhythm of night and the quiet promise of dreams yet to unfold. Eliza's story drifts on like a river, winding through the heart of London, sometimes sluggish, sometimes swift, always carrying her forward in ways she barely perceives. As the nights lengthen and the city sinks deeper into its winter gloom, she notices the stranger's appearances becoming more regular. He never comes loudly, never demands, never treats her with the casual cruelty some men allow themselves. Instead, he speaks to her in fragments of conversation questions about the market, about the fog, about the simple rhythm of her days. He never asks about her past, nor does he pry into her reasons for being in the brothel. This restraint unsettles her at first, for she has grown used to men who only see what they wish to take. Yet gradually, she finds herself anticipating his words, storing them like small treasures, letting them warm her when the house grows cold. The madam, sharp-eyed as ever, notices his attention. She warns Eliza quietly, reminding her that affection is not part of their trade, that illusions of tenderness can lead to ruin. Eliza nods and listens, but in the stillness of her heart, she holds fast to the fragile hope that something genuine might be weaving itself into her story. She tells herself she does not believe in such things, that she is wiser, older, too worn to indulge in fantasies. And yet, when she lies in bed, the thought of him lingers at the edges of her dreams, soft as candle smoke curling upward into darkness. On one particularly cold evening, when the frost etches patterns into the window glass and the brothel's hearth burns low, Eliza finds herself sharing a rare quiet moment with him. The house is less crowded than usual, the usual cacophony softened to murmurs and laughter, echoing faintly through the corridors. He sits in her small room, not with the urgency of desire, but with the patience of one who simply wishes to remain present. Their conversation drifts across ordinary subjects: the market, the docks, the ever-watchful police patrolling the alleys at night. Yet beneath each word lies an unspoken current, a sense of something unsaid, suspended between them like a fragile thread of silk. Eliza listens more than she speaks, as she often does. Yet this time, she shares a little more of herself than usual, a memory of her childhood by the countryside, the way the fields rolled out like waves beneath the sun, the way wildflowers grew thick along the hedgerows. She does not tell him everything, not the pain that led her to London, not the choices forced upon her, not the nights when hunger gnawed, sharper than fear. But she offers him a sliver of who she once was, and to her quiet surprise, he listens as though it matters. His eyes do not wander. His attention does not falter. He listens. And for Eliza, this simple act feels more precious than any coin ever pressed into her palm. That night, when he leaves, she feels an ache in her chest that is neither sorrow nor joy, but something in between, a bittersweet reminder that she is still capable of feeling, still capable of yearning. She wonders if this is dangerous, if allowing herself to care, even a little, might unravel the careful walls she has built. And yet, she cannot help the way her heart stirs, fragile though it is, like a small flame flickering stubbornly against the dark. The days continue, the rhythm unbroken, the market, the brothel, the endless cycle of smoke and song. Yet within Eliza, something has shifted. She notices the colors of the city more vividly now, the way dawn spills gold across the rooftops, the way the river glimmers like silver beneath the bridges. She lingers longer at the market stalls, not out of need, but out of curiosity, pausing to watch children chase each other between carts, to listen to the cadence of vendors calling out their wares. Life has not grown easier, but it has grown sharper, richer, as though she has been awakened to details she once let pass unnoticed. The madam, too, observes the change in her. Though she says little, her eyes linger on Eliza with suspicion, as if she senses the stirring of something beyond her control. The house thrives on routine, on the predictability of women who play their roles without hesitation. To see Eliza soften, to see her spirit flicker with something other than weary resignation, unsettles the fragile balance. Yet the madam does not interfere, not yet. She waits, watchful, knowing that such things rarely last. One night, after another long shift, Eliza finds herself alone in her room, the air heavy with the lingering scent of perfume and smoke. She sits at her window once more, looking out at the city blanketed in mist. She wonders if she is foolish for letting her thoughts wander so far, for letting hope slip quietly into her chest. And yet, even in her doubt, she cannot banish the warmth his presence brings. She knows better than to imagine a future beyond these walls. Still, for the first time in years, she allows herself to dream, not of escape, not of riches, but of being seen, of being known, of being held not as a possession, but as a person. As her eyes grow heavy, she lets the fog of London merge with the fog of her thoughts, her body sinking deeper into the chair, her breath slowing. The city hums below her, restless, alive, and yet she feels a calmness settle over her like a shawl. The world outside may remain harsh and unyielding, but in this moment, she clings to the quiet comfort of possibility. Her story is not yet finished, not yet written, and though she does not know where it leads, she rests in the rhythm of the unknown, carried softly into the embrace of night. And as you too listen and imagine, let your body soften into the quiet, your thoughts unravel like thread, your breathing steady and calm. Allow the world around you to blur, the way the city blurs beneath its fog, and drift gently into a place where dreams wait patiently, ready to receive you. The next chapter of Eliza's life unfolds slowly, as if the city itself conspires to stretch time into languid ribbons of fog and shadow. Her footsteps echo along the cobblestones each morning, her basket swinging lightly at her side, the market stalls opening one by one, like sleepy eyes blinking against the pale dawn. She has walked these streets countless times, yet lately they feel different, charged with some quiet undercurrent she cannot name. Perhaps it is the stranger's lingering presence in her memory. Perhaps it is the new way she listens to the sounds of London horses clattering past, hawkers calling out, the distant toll of church bells woven into the rhythm of her days. Whatever it is, Eliza feels as though her heart has begun to stir after years of lying dormant, like embers coaxed into flame. On one such morning, the mist clings heavy to the air, carrying with it the smell of coal smoke and damp wood. Eliza pauses at a stall where apples gleam faintly in the dim light, their skins red and mottled with the season's chill. She fingers the fruit gently, not so much in need as in habit, her thoughts elsewhere. The vendor nods to her, accustomed to her quiet presence, and she trades a few coins for a small bundle, slipping them into her basket with care. As she turns to leave, she feels the weight of eyes upon her, and when she glances back, she sees him, not the stranger of hurried nights, but the man who listens, who lingers, who unsettles her with his patience. He does not approach, not here, not in the market where lives are woven in plain view, but the faint lift of his brow and the almost imperceptible nod is enough to set her heart quickening. The walk back to the brothel feels longer than usual. She keeps her gaze forward, though every step seems laden with unspoken questions. What is he doing here, among the vendors and carts? Why does his presence stir her so deeply, when she has long taught herself not to feel? She tells herself it is nothing, just coincidence, and yet when she sits in her small room later that day, the image of him standing in the mist refuses to leave her mind. She feels both drawn and wary, curious and cautious, caught in the delicate tension between longing and fear. That evening, the house fills with laughter and music as usual, the parlor buzzing with men, eager to lose themselves in drink and pleasure. Eliza plays her part, her smile soft but practiced, her movements graceful and controlled. Yet her thoughts drift elsewhere, to the market, to the way his eyes found hers through the fog. When he finally appears at her door later that night, she feels the rhythm of her heartbeat change. He does not rush her, does not press her into performance. Instead, he sits as he has before, his presence calm, almost protective, his words meandering through the simple details of life. And once again, she finds herself offering him fragments of herself, as though each conversation loosens the threads of her guarded soul. She tells him of a summer long ago, when she was no more than a girl, barefoot in a meadow chasing after fireflies. The memory glows faintly in her mind, softened by time, yet speaking it aloud feels like breathing life into something almost forgotten. He listens, his gaze steady, his silence deep with understanding. When she pauses, uncertain of why she has shared so much, he only nods, as if to say that every part of her story, no matter how small, deserves to be heard. In that moment, Eliza feels a strange lightness, as though the walls of her room have expanded, as though the world itself has widened beyond the narrow corridors of her life. But shadows cling even to the brightest of nights. Rumors ripple through the house whispers of police raids, of crackdowns in certain districts, of women taken and never returned. The madam grows restless, her sharp eyes snapping like flint, her temper quick to flare. She reminds the girls of their duty, their need to keep the house running smoothly, their obligation to the fragile balance that shields them from ruin. For Eliza, the words are a warning, a reminder that her world is precarious, that even the faintest stirrings of hope could be crushed without mercy. Still, she clings to the quiet moments she shares with him, those rare hours when the world outside seems to fade. Sometimes, when the night is especially still, she dares to imagine what life might be if the walls of the brothel fell away, if the fog lifted to reveal a different path. She pictures a small cottage by the countryside, fields rolling out to the horizon, wildflowers nodding gently in the breeze. She pictures laughter not forced, but free. And though she tells herself these dreams are foolish, she cannot stop them from blooming in her mind, like wild roses growing stubbornly between cracks in stone. The city, meanwhile, remains relentless. The carriages rattle past, the river churns with ceaseless motion, the alleys echo with the cries of the desperate. Eliza knows the dangers well, the sickness that spreads quickly in damp rooms, the fists of drunken men, the cold indifference of those who look away. Yet through it all, she begins to notice how her own resilience has shaped her. She is not only a shadow on the edge of society, but a woman who has survived, who has endured, who has carved a space for herself in a world determined to erase her. And though she may not always feel strong, the very act of continuing, of breathing, of dreaming, is itself a quiet defiance. One night, as rain lashes against the windows and thunder growls in the distance, she sits once more at her window, watching the storm rage over the rooftops. The stranger's words linger in her ears, though he is not present. She hears the cadence of his voice in the roll of thunder, sees the steadiness of his gaze in the flicker of lightning. And she realizes, with a quiet certainty that surprises her, that whether or not he remains, whether or not their paths entwine, she has already been changed. The simple act of being seen, of being listened to, has awakened something within her that cannot be undone. As she lies down that night, the storm outside muffling the restless sounds of the city, Eliza closes her eyes and lets the rhythm of the rain soothe her. She imagines the countryside once more, the fields stretching endless and green, the air clear and sweet with the scent of wildflowers. She imagines herself walking there, barefoot in the grass, the weight of the city lifted from her shoulders. And as her breathing deepens, as sleep begins to weave its spell, she feels the faint glimmer of peace settling within her, soft as the hush of falling rain. And you too, as you listen, can let the storm outside your thoughts fade, and let the rhythm of your own breath carry you gently away. Imagine the sound of rain on rooftops, steady and soothing, each drop washing away the heaviness of the day. Allow yourself to drift, as Eliza drifts, carried by the quiet strength of dreams into a place of rest and calm. Days slipped by in a rhythm that was both familiar and strange, the cycle of the house unbroken, yet Eliza's heart no longer beat in perfect time with it. She still moved gracefully through the rooms, still greeted the men who came and went, still played her part in the carefully orchestrated theater of desire. Yet within her there was a subtle discord, a gentle tugging away from the script she had rehearsed for so long. It was as if a thread had been loosened in the fabric of her life, and though the garment still held, she could feel it beginning to unravel. The man, her quiet stranger, her listener, did not vanish as others had. He returned again and again, always without fanfare, always with the same measured patience. He never pressed her for more than she wished to give, never sought to pull her beyond what she could bear. Yet each time he sat with her, each time their words wove together in the stillness of her small room, she felt herself edging closer to a truth she had long buried. The truth that she desired more than survival, more than coin, more than the dim safety of routine. On one quiet evening, when the gas lamps flickered low and the laughter from the parlor had thinned to murmurs, he brought her a gift. It was nothing extravagant, nothing that would draw the madam's suspicion. Just a small pressed flower, carefully preserved between the folds of paper. From a field beyond the city, he said simply, placing it in her hand. She stared at it, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. A wild flower, fragile yet enduring, carried all this way only to be given to her. No man had ever brought her such a thing, not jewels, not coins, not trinkets, but something alive, something real. Eliza tucked the flower away, hidden beneath her pillow, yet its presence seemed to radiate through her entire being. That night, as she lay awake listening to the distant hum of the city, she pressed her hand against it as though it were a talisman, as though it could anchor her to something beyond these walls. For the first time in many years, she allowed herself to whisper into the darkness, a question she had long avoided. What if my life could change? But change, in London, never came without cost. The madam noticed the shift, of course. She noticed everything. Her sharp eyes missed no detail. The way Eliza's smile lingered a little longer. The way her movements seemed softer, less rehearsed, more genuine. She said nothing at first, but her silence was weighted. Her glances edged with warning. The brothel thrived on detachment, on the careful illusion of affection, without its dangerous reality. For one of her girls to feel something real was not only foolish, it was a threat. And beyond the house, the streets themselves seemed to conspire against any fragile hope. Police raids grew more frequent, their boots echoing through the alleys at night, their shouts splitting the silence. Women whispered of fines, of arrests, of houses shuttered without notice. Fear clung to the air like smoke, seeping into every corner. Eliza felt it, sharp and cold against her skin, but alongside it she felt something else, defiance. For if her world could crumble at any moment, if her life could be torn away without warning, then why not reach for more while she still could? One night, as fog rolled thick against the windows, and the house lay hushed in uneasy quiet, the man asked her a question that caught her breath. "If you could leave," he said, his voice low but steady, "where would you go?" Eliza did not answer at once. She turned the question over in her mind, weighed the danger of honesty against the safety of silence. Yet when she finally spoke, her words surprised even herself. "The countryside," she murmured. "Fields, trees, air that doesn't taste of smoke. Somewhere no one knows my name." He nodded, as though her answer were not a dream but a plan, something possible, something already half-formed in the air between them. She wanted to ask what he meant by it, wanted to press for promises, but fear tightened her throat. Promises were dangerous things. Better to let the words hang suspended, fragile, and unbroken. That night, when he left, Eliza lingered by her window, long after the city had fallen silent. She watched the mist curl along the cobblestones. The gas lamps flickered dimly through the fog. And she felt it again, that stirring, that restless yearning that no amount of caution could smother. The brothel walls seemed closer than ever, pressing in on her, suffocating her with their familiarity. She knew then, with a clarity that startled her, that she could not go on forever as she had. Sooner or later, something would have to break. And as you listen, as you follow her story, Let yourself breathe deeply, slowly, allowing the weight of your own day to slip gently from your shoulders. Imagine the fog of London wrapping around you, soft and protective, carrying you away from the noise of the world. Like Eliza at her window, you can rest in the stillness, eyes heavy, heart quiet, drifting on the edge of dreams where anything feels possible. The brothel pulsed with life as always, its laughter and music spilling into the street like candlelight slipping beneath a door. Yet to Eliza, the house felt different now, closer, smaller, less a home of survival, and more a gilded cage whose bars she could finally see. Each creak of the floorboards, each rattle of glass, each sigh of a tired woman in the next room seemed magnified, heavy with meaning. She had walked these corridors for years, but lately, every step felt borrowed, temporary, as though the walls themselves whispered of endings. Her stranger, the man who had slipped past her defenses without even trying, returned more often now. His presence was steady, almost routine, though never predictable. Some nights he came quietly, sharing little more than silence and a candle's glow. Other nights he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful, painting pictures of a world beyond London's smoke. He told her of the countryside he had once known, of rivers that wound lazily through green fields, of orchards that bloomed white and pink each spring. He did not promise these things to her, did not hold them out as bait, but the way he described them lodged deep in her imagination, and she found herself dreaming. At night, when the house grew quiet and the girls collapsed into restless sleep, Eliza would sit at her window with the pressed flower he had given her. She would hold it gently between her fingers and close her eyes, imagining she could smell its faint sweetness, even though time had long since stolen its scent. She pictured herself walking through fields of such flowers, their petals brushing her bare ankles, their colors dazzling beneath the sun. The image came to her so vividly that sometimes she awoke with the sensation still clinging to her skin, a phantom touch of freedom she could not shake. But dreams, she knew, were dangerous. The madam's suspicion had grown. Though she spoke little, Eliza could feel her gaze, sharp as a blade, following her through the rooms. The madam knew the signs. She had seen it before. Women who forgot their place, who let themselves believe in affection or escape. Those women rarely lasted long. Some fled in the night, vanishing into the city's shadows, only to return weeks later, broken and desperate. Others simply disappeared, their names swallowed by the alleys, their stories ending in silence. Eliza reminded herself of these truths daily, yet still her heart betrayed her. One stormy evening, when rain hammered against the roof and the parlor's laughter sounded distant and hollow, he asked her something she had long dreaded. "Would you go?" he said softly. "If I offered you a way out?" Eliza froze. The words struck her like a blow, both intoxicating and terrifying. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a long moment she could not answer. Every instinct screamed caution. Every memory warned her of betrayal. Yet beneath the fear, another voice whispered quieter but steadier that perhaps this was the very moment she had been waiting for. Still, she did not answer. Not yet. Instead, she looked at him, searching his face for deceit, for the glint of cruelty she had come to expect from men. But she found none. Only patience, only steadiness. He did not press her, did not demand. He only held her gaze, as though content to let the question linger unanswered. That night, after he left, Eliza lay awake long after the others had fallen asleep. The storm outside raged on, wind rattling the shutters, rain flooding the streets. She felt the city tremble beneath it, fragile and uncertain, much like her own heart. And she realized, with a clarity that startled her, that the life she had built was not life at all, but survival stretched thin across years of silence. If she stayed, she might endure, but she would never truly live. The thought terrified her. Yet it also set her pulse racing with something dangerously close to hope. In the days that followed, She began to notice every detail of the city with sharpened senses, as though she were memorizing it for the last time. The cries of vendors in the market, the clatter of carriage wheels on stone, the smell of coal smoke drifting through the alleys, all of it pressed into her memory like ink into parchment. She watched the other women with new eyes too, their faces lined with weariness, their laughter forced, their hopes buried. She wondered if any of them had once dreamed as she did, if they too had once held wildflowers in their hands and imagined another life. And still, she told no one. The madam's gaze grew heavier, suspicion coiling tight, but Eliza moved carefully, playing her part with practiced grace. She smiled when she needed to. She laughed when she must. She moved through the house as though nothing had changed. Yet inside, she carried a secret flame, hidden but burning brighter with each passing day. She knew it was dangerous. She knew it might destroy her. And yet, she clung to it all the same. Because for the first time in years, she had something worth risking everything for. And as you listen, let your own thoughts drift like the fog rolling across London. Imagine yourself standing in the narrow alleys, lantern light flickering, the smell of rain and smoke thick in the air. Feel the quiet weight of choices pressing gently against you, the way Eliza feels them pressing against her now. Breathe deeply. Let the tension ease from your body and drift with her into the unknown, carried on the soft rhythm of hope and fear entwined. The fog of London seemed to grow thicker as the hours passed. Gas lamps glowed dimly, their halos trembling like tired eyes straining to stay awake. Inside the parlor, the rhythm of footsteps softened, and conversations dwindled into whispers. The warmth of the fire was now a gentle glow, casting elongated shadows on the walls like silhouettes of another life. Clara sat at the edge of her narrow bed, brushing her hair slowly, the bristles catching on strands as though reluctant to let go. The mirror on the vanity reflected a face both young and worn, the kind of beauty that time pressed upon with equal parts tenderness and cruelty. Our story today sets sail in the folds of her reflection, because within that single image was a tale of endurance, of nights that blurred into mornings, of laughter forced and tears swallowed whole. The fire crackled softly, the sound not unlike a lullaby, as though urging her to let her shoulders drop, to release the weight that pressed against her ribs. She thought of the children on the street, running barefoot through puddles, laughing with an innocence she no longer remembered. Once she had been one of them. Once she had believed that laughter could be endless. And now she was here. The brothel was not the grandest, nor was it the most desolate. It was tucked between shops that sold books and spices, its facade painted with an aging cream that peeled in places, revealing the raw timber beneath. During the day, it looked almost ordinary, as though it might be the home of a merchant or seamstress. But at night, its walls pulsed with another kind of life. Laughter spilled from windows cracked open to let out smoke and heat. Carriages rattled past, some stopping for patrons too impatient to wait until the door was reached. Inside, each girl had her routine, a way of moving that allowed her to endure the long hours. Some hummed to themselves when no one was listening. Others counted the coins again and again, as though by staring at them hard enough, they might multiply. Clara had her brush, her mirror, and her silence. Silence was her armor, her refuge. In silence, she could drift into memory, into a world where her mother's lullabies wrapped around her like wool, where bread was warm, and evenings meant stories by firelight rather than strangers' hands. Yet even silence was broken sometimes. The madam's voice would cut through the air like the clang of a bell, calling names, assigning clients, making sure no one wasted a single hour. Clara often wondered if the madam had once been like her, a girl with trembling fingers and dreams that seemed so fragile they shattered at the first touch. Perhaps she had. Perhaps every woman in that house carried the ghost of a girl she once was, a girl who hadn't known yet how heavy her nights would become. The streets outside, meanwhile, never truly slept. Peddlers shouted even after midnight, selling roasted chestnuts or trinkets to men stumbling out of taverns. Policemen walked their beats, their whistles ready, though more often than not, they turned a blind eye to the comings and goings at the brothel door. Respectability and corruption danced hand in hand, as they always had, as they always would. And the girls, caught in between, became both visible and invisible watched, wanted, and yet denied the dignity of being seen as whole. Clara leaned back against her thin pillow, closing her eyes for a moment. The hum of the city became a backdrop, a low murmur like waves breaking against a distant shore. She tried to imagine herself somewhere else, perhaps in a meadow where daisies leaned toward the sun, or in a small village where faces were familiar and kind. She tried to imagine, but the sound of footsteps in the corridor dragged her back, the soft thud against worn boards announcing another hour of duty. There was no choice. She rose, smoothed her dress, and prepared to step once more into the glow of gaslight and smoke. Each step was measured, deliberate, like the tolling of a clock. Tick, tock. Night after night, the rhythm continued. Yet deep within her, there remained a quiet ember that refused to die. It was small, fragile, but alive. And perhaps that ember was what kept her walking, kept her breathing, kept her looking at the mirror with the faintest trace of defiance in her eyes. And so, dear listener, as the fire in Clara's room dwindles, as the city outside exhales another plume of fog into the night, we drift deeper into her story. The beds creak, the laughter fades, and the shadows lengthen. You are safe, warm, and calm, here with her in this suspended moment of reflection. And as her footsteps fade into the parlor once more, let your breath slow, let your thoughts quiet, and know that we are only beginning to unravel the threads of what it meant to live, what it meant to endure in the shadowed heart of Victorian London. The hours stretched on like ribbons unwinding in the dark. The brothel never truly rested, only shifted its weight from one moment to the next, like a body rolling in uneasy sleep. Somewhere downstairs, a piano groaned beneath the hesitant touch of a patron who fancied himself a musician. The keys clanged, out of tune but persistent, filling the parlor with notes that seemed to stagger rather than dance. Clara listened as she descended the staircase, each creak beneath her feet folding into the tune, as though the house itself were sighing in rhythm with the music. The lamps burned lower now, their glass chimneys smudged with soot, their flames flickering like tired hearts. A haze of smoke drifted in the parlor, curling around velvet curtains and sinking into the patterned carpets. Men lounged on settees, their coats tossed aside, their eyes glazed with the comfort of drink. They spoke in bursts, their laughter cutting through the thick air before dissolving again into murmurs. Clara moved among them, a practiced grace in her steps. Her smile was measured, her voice soft, her laughter just enough to keep them tethered. Yet beneath the surface, her mind wandered elsewhere. She saw beyond the parlor, past the peeling wallpaper and velvet, into the city that stretched endlessly beyond their walls. She imagined the street lamps outside still glowing, the river glistening under a muted moon, the horses clattering across bridges, as though carrying messages of freedom she would never receive. One man tugged at her sleeve, his breath heavy with gin. His words slurred, his stories tangled. Clara leaned close, listening as though the secrets he spilled were treasures, though her thoughts drifted like leaves in a current. She had learned long ago that men did not come for truth. They came for the echo of it, the illusion of being heard. And so she nodded at the right moments, offered soft laughter, and let him believe that his words mattered more than they ever had in his own home. Hours blurred. The madam's footsteps echoed now and again, sharp and brisk, keeping the rhythm of the house steady. Coins clinked, glasses emptied, and upstairs doors closed with a finality that sealed another chapter in a book no one would ever read aloud. Clara, in the quiet between duties, allowed herself moments to breathe. She would lean against the banister, feel the warm wood beneath her hand, and let her eyes wander across the parlor as though memorizing each detail. The worn sofa, the faded carpet, the tired faces, each piece of the house was a verse in the silent lullaby she sang to herself. The clock in the hallway struck 3, its chime resonating through the boards. Most of the patrons had stumbled home or collapsed into restless slumber. The air grew cooler as the fire dwindled, its embers glowing faintly like the last thoughts before sleep. Clara returned to her small room, the mirror greeting her once more with the faint reflection of a woman, half herself and half her shadow. She set the brush down, her hair tumbling around her shoulders like a curtain shielding her from the world. Lying in bed, she traced the patterns of cracks on the ceiling, imagining them as rivers flowing across a vast map. Each line carried her somewhere different, a countryside she had never seen, a city she might never visit, a cottage by the sea where the salt wind kissed the windows at dawn. Her breath slowed, her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment she hovered at the edge of sleep. Yet the sounds of the house, an occasional cough, a distant laugh, the shift of floorboards, reminded her that dreams were never entirely hers to keep. Still, the ember of defiance burned. She clutched it quietly in her chest, a secret no one could extinguish. Perhaps, she thought, one day the ember would grow, would flare into a fire that carried her beyond these walls. Until then, she drifted into silence, letting the rhythm of her breath match the soft pulse of the city outside. The Thames whispered in the distance, the fog thickened, and the brothel, for just a few hours, sighed into uneasy slumber. And as you, dear listener, rest alongside her in this moment, allow your breath to deepen, your body to soften, and your thoughts to float like smoke toward the ceiling. The world outside can wait. Tonight we linger here, in the quiet embrace of shadow and ember, drifting ever deeper into Clara's tale. The night melted into a hushed gray dawn, and the brothel's walls seemed to sigh with relief, as if weary from carrying so many secrets. A faint light slipped through the lace curtains of Clara's room, its edges softened by the ever-present fog that crept off the Thames. She stirred awake not with alarm, but with the slow heaviness of someone who had lived half a dozen lives in a single night. Her body remembered each movement, each careful gesture, each forced smile, but her mind searched for something gentler, a thought she could hold like a small candle in the gloom. The floor was cold beneath her bare feet as she rose. She moved to the small basin in the corner, splashing water onto her face, feeling its icy bite chase away the final remnants of sleep. In the mirror, her eyes met themselves, tired, yes, but still carrying a spark. That spark was her defiance, her secret talisman. Many women here had lost it, surrendered to the endless rhythm of nights that blurred into one another. Clara clung to hers with quiet stubbornness, the way some cling to prayers or lockets. Downstairs, the air still smelled of smoke and spilled gin, though the silence was nearly complete now. The madam, with her sharp gaze and heavy step, was already awake, keeping accounts at the desk in the corner. She looked up briefly as Clara passed, but said nothing. Approval or reproach was rarely spoken aloud. Clara slipped into the kitchen, where the housekeeper, a small woman with strong arms, kneaded dough on a flour-dusted table. The smell of yeast and wood smoke filled the room, a comfort older and kinder than the velvet halls upstairs. Clara lingered for a moment, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of weak tea. The warmth seeped into her fingers, grounding her in the present. Outside, the city was stirring. She could hear the distant clatter of carts on cobblestones, the calls of vendors, the faint chiming of church bells marking the hour. Life continued in 1,000 different directions, most of them untouched by the shadows of this house. For a moment, Clara let herself imagine walking among them, anonymous and free, her footsteps carrying her away from all she had known. Later that morning, she was sent to the market with another girl, Jane, a red-haired woman with a laugh too bright to be entirely real. The two walked arm in arm through the damp streets, their skirts gathering mud at the hem. The market was alive with noise and color vendors shouting their wares, children darting between stalls, the scent of fish, spices, and fresh bread mingling in the mist. Clara breathed deeply, savoring the chaos. Here, among strangers, she could pretend she was simply another young woman buying apples or ribbons, no different from anyone else. Jane chatted endlessly, pointing out handsome men and scowling matrons, making Clara laugh despite herself. Beneath the laughter, though, Clara sensed the same ember she carried Jane, too, longed for something more, though she disguised it with stories and jokes. They purchased bread, candles, and fabric before returning to the brothel, their arms laden, their cheeks flushed from the cold air. As the day faded, preparations began anew. Lamps were polished, curtains drawn, the parlor arranged as if last night's chaos had never touched it. Clara watched the transformation with a kind of detachment, as though she were observing a play being staged, each prop returned to its place for the next act. A piano was tuned as best it could be, fresh flowers placed in chipped vases, and the hearth stoked until its flames licked the air hungrily. When the first patrons arrived, the house awakened once more. The cycle began again, laughter, whispers, the clinking of coins, the slow unraveling of time. Clara found herself seated beside a man with kind eyes, a rarity in this place. He spoke softly, not of conquest or business, but of books, of poetry, of the rivers of his homeland. For a moment, she let herself be drawn in, allowed her heart to ease into the cadence of his voice. She knew it was fleeting, that come morning he would be gone like all the others. Yet the comfort of the moment was real enough to cradle her spirit. Hours later, when the parlor had emptied and the lamps burned low once again, Clara returned to her room. She sat by the window, gazing out at the fog-draped city. Somewhere beyond the smoke and soot, she knew there were gardens, fields, places where the air was clean and the sky unbroken. She closed her eyes, breathing slowly, letting her body sink into the chair. The night whispered around her, and she felt herself drifting, her thoughts like lanterns floating down a dark river. And as you, dear listener, rest alongside her in imagination, let your own body soften, your breath deepen, and your thoughts drift gently toward the edge of sleep. For now, there is no rush, no weight of expectation. Only the rhythm of Clara's world, unfolding softly, guiding you further into calm. Our story drifts onward, one breath at a time. The city outside never truly slept, but it learned how to whisper. By the time Clara rose again the following evening, London's fog had grown so thick it pressed against the windows like a hand, blotting out the shapes of rooftops and spires. Gas lamps glowed dimly through the haze, their halos blurred, making the street seem more dream than reality. The brothel, lit from within, became a beacon of warmth in the murk, though what warmth it offered was a complicated kind. Clara tied her hair carefully, pinning it back with deliberate precision. Each movement was ritual now, part of the armor she donned before stepping into her role. The mirror gave her no illusions. She saw her fatigue, her longing, but she also saw resilience. There was strength in repetition, in the way she could transform herself night after night into someone who smiled and soothed, who listened and adapted. Survival had its own quiet elegance. The parlor filled quickly, the air heavy with laughter and tobacco smoke. Musicians plucked at strings, their songs stumbling but cheerful, weaving background texture into the night's performance. Clara drifted through the room, her skirts brushing against rugs worn thin by years of feet. She greeted patrons with soft glances, guided conversations with gentle nudges, her presence subtle yet steady, like a current beneath still water. Among the men was one who stood apart, not because of wealth or arrogance, but because of his silence. He sat with a book in his lap, unopened, as though he had brought it simply to anchor himself. His eyes followed the room, but engaged with no one, until Clara, curiosity tugging at her, approached. "Do you read?" she asked softly, "or simply carry words as company?" He looked up, startled, and smiled faintly. "Both, perhaps. Tonight, company matters more than words." She sat beside him, their conversation unfolding slowly, each phrase deliberate. He spoke of travel, of lands beyond the city where rivers ran clear and stars shone unbroken. Clara listened, letting the images take root in her imagination. She could see the meadows he described, smell the pine forests, feel the cool air that belonged to places untouched by soot. For a fleeting hour, she existed in those landscapes, walking among them in her mind, while the parlor's noise blurred into background hum. When he left, he placed no demands upon her. Instead, he bowed slightly, as though recognizing her not as part of the house, but as herself. That small gesture lingered with her long after the door closed behind him. She held it quietly, storing it alongside the ember she kept hidden in her chest. The night deepened. Other men came and went, each one carrying their own hunger, their own shadow. Clara gave them what they sought, not love, not truth, but echoes that resembled both. By dawn, when the last lamp was extinguished and the parlor lay empty once more, she felt both drained and strangely alive. These contradictions defined her existence, weary yet hopeful, bound yet quietly free in moments only she could claim. Later that morning, Clara wandered beyond the brothel, her cloak pulled tightly against the chill. The streets were slick with rain, puddles reflecting the gray sky. She walked aimlessly, allowing her thoughts to unravel with each step. Near the river, she paused, watching the water surge past. Barges creaked as they drifted, gulls cried overhead, and the current carried scraps of wood and paper as if the Thames itself collected stories. She imagined tossing her own story into its depths, letting the river carry it away to seas she would never see. A child darted past her, chasing a hoop, his laughter clear and bright. Clara smiled, though a heaviness tugged at her chest. Once, long ago, she too had laughed so freely, before life narrowed her path to the walls she now knew too well. Still, the sound of the boy's joy reminded her that innocence existed, even if only in fragments. She turned back toward the brothel, her steps slower now, her heart carrying the echo of his laughter like a charm. That evening, she found herself confiding quietly to Jane as they prepared for the night. The two women sat before the shared mirror, powdering their faces, arranging their hair. "Do you ever think," Clara whispered, "of what lies beyond this city? Of leaving, even if only in dreams?" Jane paused, her brush hovering in mid-air. For once, her usual bright reply did not come. Instead, she looked at Clara through the reflection, her expression soft. "Every night," she admitted. "But dreaming is safer than leaving, isn't it? Dreaming won't break you." Clara nodded, though the ember in her chest flared. She wondered if perhaps dreaming too long might also wither her, if keeping her world confined to whispers and illusions would smother what strength she still carried. The house grew busy again, pulling them back into its rhythm. Yet as Clara moved among patrons that night, a new awareness stirred within her. She began to listen not only to their words, but to the silence beneath them, the loneliness that drove them here. In their hunger, she recognized her own longing for connection, for something genuine. That recognition softened her, made her presence warmer, though it also deepened her ache. When the lamps finally dimmed and her duties ended, Clara returned to her room and lay awake. She traced her future in the cracks above her bed, imagining different paths branching outward. Some ended quickly, like short roads swallowed by fog. Others stretched farther, winding toward horizons she could barely picture. One, perhaps, might lead her beyond these walls for good. As you rest with her in this moment, dear listener, let your own mind drift along those winding paths. Imagine possibilities, not as demands, but as gentle lanterns illuminating the dark. Each one shines softly, guiding you deeper into calm, into the quiet certainty that even in stillness, you are moving forward. And so, Clara's story carries us further, step by step, like footprints fading into mist. The days turned like pages, each one written in the same ink of smoke and whispers. Yet Clara began to notice how even small variations shaped the story. One evening, the fog was so dense that the brothel's lanterns seemed to float in mid-air, glowing orbs adrift in the night. Another evening, rain battered the windows with a steady percussion, a lullaby only the city could sing. These changes, subtle as they were, kept Clara aware of time's passage, a reminder that the world outside never ceased to breathe, even when her own life felt suspended. In the parlor, the ritual continued. Men arrived weary from work, some boastful, others timid, each seeking escape. The air grew warm with the mingling of perfume, tobacco, and candle wax. Laughter spilled into corners, sometimes genuine, more often forced. Clara learned to read the room, as one might read a stage play, who entered eager for companionship, who sought silence, who carried anger that could spark if mishandled. It was a delicate dance, and her survival depended upon moving with the music of others' moods. Yet in quiet moments, when the fire dimmed and conversation softened, Clara's thoughts wandered. She imagined the countryside, though she had never truly seen it. Fields rolling under endless sky, rivers untainted by soot, air that smelled of grass instead of coal. She held these visions close, letting them soothe her even as she played her part in the velvet-draped theater of the house. Jane often joined her in these stolen reveries. They would sit side by side, whispering behind fans or during errands. "If I could leave," Jane murmured once, "I'd have a little shop by the seaside. Nothing grand, just ribbons and cloth, enough to keep me busy and free." Clara smiled, picturing it. "And I would come visit. We'd drink tea with the sound of waves at our doorstep." They laughed softly, though their laughter carried an ache. Dreams spoken aloud were fragile things. The air seemed to tremble with the risk of them shattering. The brothel itself seemed to respond to their moods, its old timbers groaning in the night, its staircases creaking like tired bones. Sometimes Clara felt the house was alive, listening, storing every secret in its beams. Perhaps one day it would tell their stories, though she doubted anyone outside would want to hear them. One night, however, something shifted. A man arrived not with the swagger of others, but with hesitation. He was older, his coat worn, his hands calloused. He spoke little, yet when his gaze met Clara's, she felt a quiet recognition, as though he, too, carried an ember of defiance beneath layers of fatigue. He asked for nothing extravagant, no performance, only conversation. They spoke of weather, of books, of music, their words meandering like a gentle stream. For Clara, the simplicity of it was startling. No pretense, no mask, only two weary souls finding comfort in sharing breath. When he departed, he pressed a coin into her hand, but more than the coin, he left her with a lingering sense of possibility. Not all who entered the house came to take. Some, however rarely, brought fragments of humanity with them. It was a reminder that the world held more than hunger. It held connection, if only briefly. Clara held on to that thought as she lay awake that night, listening to the rain tapping the window. Her body relaxed into the mattress, her breath slow and even, yet her mind danced lightly with the memory of that simple conversation. It was enough to warm her through the chill, enough to cradle her toward sleep. As the weeks passed, Clara noticed herself watching more keenly, not just the patrons, but the women too. Each of them carried dreams tucked away, flickers of selves they might never fully reveal. One embroidered handkerchiefs in secret, her stitches delicate and precise. Another wrote poems by candlelight, hiding them beneath her mattress. Jane, with her bright laugh, hummed songs from her childhood when she thought no one listened. Clara found herself cherishing these fragments, as if together They formed a hidden tapestry of resilience. The city outside continued to breathe its smoky lullaby. Carriages rattled across cobblestones. Vendors cried their wares. Bells tolled in the fog. Life pulsed endlessly, and though Clara's world felt confined, she sensed herself part of a larger rhythm. The thought comforted her, like resting her head against the heartbeat of something vast and eternal. One evening, as she gazed from her window, she imagined the fog not as a prison, but as a veil, something she might one day step through, emerging into a clearer world beyond. That vision soothed her, coaxing her deeper into calm. And as you, dear listener, rest with her now, allow your breath to flow like that fog, slow, soft, endless. Each inhale carries you deeper into the story. Each exhale releases the weight of your own day. Together, we drift further into Clara's quiet journey, where dreams glow like lanterns and the night hums with possibility. Our story drifts onward, gently, like the Thames under moonlight. Softly, as the candlelight flickered, the woman's hand brushed across the worn wooden rail of the staircase. The creak beneath her foot was like a sigh from the old house, as though it remembered every soul who had ever climbed it. The air smelled faintly of lavender water, mixed with the deeper musk of smoke and polish, a scent that seemed to cling to the velvet drapes and satin sheets alike. Outside, the streets of Victorian London pulsed faintly with the distant rhythm of carriages and horses. But within these walls, time felt as if it bent, slowed, and wound itself gently around the people inside. Each night began with anticipation, a soft flutter in the chest, not unlike the hush before a confession. Our story tonight continues with the way shadows softened sharp edges, how the women carried themselves like dancers moving through dim light, their laughter hushed but genuine in stolen moments. They were not merely figures in history. They were living threads in a fabric that has long been folded away. Some wore their pasts on their sleeves' faces, lined with more than powder could hide, while others were fresh, bright, and reckless. Yet all found themselves part of this tapestry, where secrets were currency, and comfort was something carefully rationed. One such woman, Eliza, had learned early that survival in a brothel was more art than toil. She was small in frame, but her eyes carried storms quick to see, quicker to conceal. Tonight, she moved through the hall with practiced grace, carrying a small porcelain teapot whose handle was chipped from countless pourings. The tea was more ritual than refreshment, a way to settle nerves before the night began. She set the tray down, her fingers trembling only faintly before smoothing her skirts, as though to iron away the unease. The rooms each carried a story of their own. Behind one door, the sound of a piano filtered softly, each note tender and imperfect, yet somehow soothing. Behind another, the hush of conversation, the whispers of men unburdening secrets they would never dare utter by daylight. This place was not simply for pleasure. It was a theater where every performer knew their role, but also where quiet tragedies and fleeting triumphs took shape. Eliza paused at the landing, listening to the murmurs. She felt that same ache she always carried, the mixture of weariness and resolve, of wondering how long her life would continue on this same path. Yet she also knew there was something almost hypnotic about the rhythm of it all. The velvet curtains drawn across candlelit windows, the soft brushing of gowns against floorboards, the hushed laughter that might have been mistaken for joy. It lulled even those who had long since stopped believing in it. And so the night deepened. The fire in the main parlor crackled gently, throwing golden light across the walls. A gentleman reclined on the settee, his hand trailing across embroidered cushions while he murmured idle compliments. His words were the kind that slipped like smoke, drifting and insubstantial, yet still they filled the air with a kind of comfort. Eliza listened from the corner, her posture graceful, her voice, when it finally emerged, a gentle tide pulling him further into ease. She had learned that the trick was not to dazzle, but to soothe, to draw attention without demanding it, to let conversation feel like warm water lapping at tired bones. Every candle burned a little lower. Every hour ticked away with a softness that felt both endless and fleeting. Outside, the wind stirred faintly against the panes, but inside, the story of each woman unfolded one sigh at a time. Some dreams were confessed between breaths, others hidden behind eyes that glittered in firelight. The night was both a sanctuary and a stage, and each breath, each word, each lingering touch was part of the hypnotic rhythm that held the house together. Eliza thought back to the girl she had been, the one who had once walked barefoot across cobblestones, her pockets empty, her laughter unguarded. That girl seemed far away now, yet not lost. Perhaps she lived still in the way Eliza sometimes smiled without meaning to, or in the way she leaned into silence when the noise of the world became too sharp. The past had not vanished, it had only changed shape, softened like wax beneath a steady flame. And so, in this brothel, time folded in strange ways. Hours slipped like ribbons from a spool, winding and unwinding without end. Some men came seeking escape, others seeking power, still others seeking something they themselves could not name. The women, too, sought, though what they sought was less often spoken aloud. Security, perhaps. Belonging. A fragile sense of control in a world that often offered none. As the night wore on, Eliza's hand lingered briefly on the cool brass of a doorknob. She inhaled deeply, the scent of lavender and wood smoke filling her lungs, and for a moment she allowed herself the smallest flicker of hope that perhaps tomorrow would bring something different. Or perhaps it would not. But tonight she would play her role. She would weave her presence into the music of whispers and footsteps. She would exist within this candlelit story, as though there were no world beyond. The gentle rhythm continued, heartbeat by heartbeat, step by step, voice by voice. And as we rest here with her, surrounded by this dim glow, the world outside drifts further away. The sound of carriages fades, the air stills, and all that remains is the quiet cadence of lives lived in shadows, their stories lingering like perfume in the night. So let yourself breathe slowly now, in and out. Allow the flicker of flame and the softness of footsteps to lull you. Imagine the velvet drapes swaying faintly in the night air. Imagine the quiet fire casting its warmth. Imagine the sound of distant laughter that carries no demand, only a gentle murmur. Here we drift with Eliza, with every woman who ever walked this path, with every secret that has long since dissolved into silence. And in this story, you may rest. The night wore on, and the brothel's heartbeat slowed to a quieter rhythm, as if even the walls themselves were beginning to drift into slumber. Candles guttered low, their wax forming delicate pools upon silver holders, while the fireplace whispered faintly in the parlor. The house felt alive in its stillness, breathing softly with the hushed murmurs of those who lingered in its embrace. Eliza moved through the dim corridors with her usual grace, skirts brushing like whispers against the floorboards. She had learned long ago that the quietest steps made the deepest impressions. She paused at the end of the hall, her fingertips grazing the velvet drapery that concealed the entrance to one of the more ornate rooms. Behind it, a faint ripple of laughter could be heard, low and resonant, the kind of laughter that carried both satisfaction and fatigue. For a moment, she leaned her forehead against the cool fabric, closing her eyes, listening not so much to the sound, but to the atmosphere it carried. Every note of laughter, every sigh, every shifting of weight upon feather mattresses was part of a language unspoken, one she had long since mastered. The others in the house knew their roles just as well. Mary Ann, tall and statuesque, carried herself with a queenly composure that hid her nerves. Clara, soft-voiced and youthful, moved like a dancer in constant rehearsal, her gestures fluid, her laughter like bells in a wind. Each woman carried a different mask, but together they formed the living tapestry of this house. They were not merely companions for fleeting hours. They were guardians of a kind of intimacy that was at once genuine and carefully constructed. As Eliza descended the staircase into the main parlor, she allowed her eyes to roam across the familiar scene. Cushions scattered, shawls draped across chair backs, a decanter half emptied upon a low table. Gentlemen lounged, their coats shrugged carelessly onto hooks, their faces softened by drink and dim light. A young man in the corner spoke with urgency, confessing to Clara his troubles with debt and dishonor. She listened, her head tilted, her hand resting lightly upon his sleeve, her silence offering more solace than any words might have. Eliza crossed the room quietly and knelt to adjust the logs in the fire. The flames brightened at her coaxing, casting fresh warmth across the chamber. The crackle was soothing, a reminder of hearths and homes that some of these men might never know again. The fire's glow brushed across Eliza's face, painting her features in tones of gold and shadow. She felt the eyes of one gentleman upon her, an older man with sharp cheekbones softened now by weariness. He watched her not with desire, but with a kind of longing, as though she reminded him of something he had lost. When she rose, she offered him only a small smile, one that neither invited nor rejected. It was enough. His gaze softened, and he leaned back against the cushions, as though even that brief exchange had soothed him. That was the unspoken art of their work, knowing when to give, when to hold back, when to allow a moment to hover in silence. The hour slipped further toward dawn. The clamor of the city outside had diminished to little more than the occasional rattle of carriage wheels, a stray bark of a dog in the alley, a faint call of a watchman in the distance. Within the brothel, the rhythm of life slowed. Men departed quietly, coats pulled tight against the chill, faces set back into the masks they wore for the world. The women moved like shadows behind them, clearing cups, folding shawls, smoothing bedclothes, each gesture part of the ritual that signaled the night's end. Eliza found herself in her own small chamber at last, the door closing with a muted click behind her. Her room was modest, compared to the parlor's grandeur, just a narrow bed, a small table, and a single candle burning low. Yet it was hers, a space where she could breathe without pretense. She sat upon the edge of the bed, pulling the pins from her hair one by one, letting the waves fall free across her shoulders. The weight of the day slipped slowly away with each pin, each loosened strand. She thought of the faces she had seen that night, the confessions murmured in her ear, the laughter that sometimes rang hollow, the rare moments of tenderness that felt startling in their sincerity. These fragments clung to her, weaving themselves into her dreams as she lay down upon the mattress. She knew that tomorrow night the same rhythm would begin again, the candles, the whispers, the roles played with practiced ease. Yet within her, she carried the smallest flame of something else, the belief that there was meaning even in repetition, that each night carved a little more of her story into the quiet walls of this house. The candle flickered lower, casting shadows that danced along the plaster ceiling. Eliza closed her eyes, her breathing slow, her body surrendering at last to the stillness. In her dreams, the brothel became something different, less a place of survival, more a theater of gentle illusions, where every sigh, every glance, every touch was not a burden, but a gift. And though morning would soon wash away the night, for now she drifted in that liminal space where stories and sleep entwined, where memory softened and the heart felt briefly unburdened. And so, as the dawn began to brush its first faint light against the edges of the city, the brothel grew silent. Its walls, heavy with secrets, exhaled a slow, steady breath. The world outside began anew, but within, time remained suspended, holding close the stories of all who had crossed its threshold. Eliza, the quiet dreamer within those walls, rested at last, her heartbeat sensing with the rhythm of the house, her story continuing quietly in the hush of sleep. And as we rest here with her, you too may let go of the weight you carry. Breathe in deeply, and let the stillness of the night cradle you. Imagine the velvet curtains, the flickering candles, the soft warmth of firelight upon your skin. Imagine yourself drifting down those shadowed halls, each step leading you closer to rest. In this story, as in your dreams, you are safe. And as Eliza drifts into her slumber, so may you drift too softly, gently, completely into the quiet embrace of night.